would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker. Licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Hope it's been a good week for everyone. We've got an interesting topic today that I think is a good one, so hopefully it'll give you a lot of things to think about over the weekend. Before we jump in, though, as always, the best way to reach out is to head on over to therebelbroker.com. From there, you can send along any ideas, suggestions, or observations that you might have. If you'd prefer to either email those to me directly, just send those to therebel@therebelbroker.com. And, of course, as always, if you'd like to join in on the possibility of winning yourself a $50 Amazon gift card, click the big red button at the top of the page titled Take the Survey to support the show. Use the same email address both times you're asked, answer a handful of questions, and you are done. We've already given out $100 in October and November, and we'll be giving out another $50 in December. So by finishing up that process, you will be in the drawing for the next go-around. So take advantage of that. You're helping the show, plus you're also giving yourself a chance for $50. So that's just a no-lose situation for anybody. I came across an article actually a little while ago that I think is one of those great little numbers that points us in the direction of potentially growing markets, right? And that's something I try to do a lot in terms of what statistics are showing us are happening in different areas. This one takes a slightly different turn on things. It comes to us from the Wall Street Journal, and it really points us in the direction of some potential future Silicon Valleys. Now, why would we even want to discuss that? Why does there need to be a new Silicon Valley? Well, I think a very good argument can be made for this kind of a phenomenon and for it to grow. Now, to give you a little bit of history, this is not a new thing. So it's not a guarantee that the trend we're seeing now is going to result in a huge push out into other areas. However, the last time this happened was in the early 90s. And Silicon Valley was becoming less and less desirable for a lot of companies, and we saw several companies move into various other areas. Now, surprisingly enough, one of them was Apple Computers. While their main headquarters for the United States are still in Cupertino, my understanding is that there was once discussion of actually moving the headquarters of Apple Computer out of Cupertino. They were considering, they actually got to the point where they were evaluating 3 different locations. And ultimately what they ended up doing was just moving technical support to Austin, Texas. So and that continues to be true today. If you dial a phone to talk to Apple technical support, you're talking to someone most likely who's in Austin, Texas. Lots of other companies have done the same thing with varying degrees of success. There was a big migration of Apple employees that left California and went to Austin with that transition, and a number of them ended up moving back just a few years later. Texas or Austin anyway, wasn't for them. However, having lived here all of this time, I feel like things are even more ripe now for this type of thing than before, simply because other parts of the country have really grown up since the early 90s in terms of access to the resources that a lot of these high-tech folks really need in order to do what they need to do. Now, one city that is not on this list that's put out by the Wall Street Journal is Chattanooga, Tennessee. I've been keeping my eye on Chattanooga, and there's some part of me that really wants to take a trip out to Chattanooga just to get some firsthand ground truth on it. But it's one of those places that did the fiber to the entire city thing, and it really caused a renaissance in their downtown area in terms of startups popping up to take advantage of this great access so that they can compete in what they provide to the high-tech world. And in addition to what we're seeing in terms of migration, remember we covered migration in a show last week or maybe earlier this week, and we see that folks in Silicon Valley are migrating. There are more people leaving Silicon Valley than staying, and they are going to some of the areas on this list or very nearby this list. So I thought it would be good to run down this simply because from what I'm seeing, these are kind of on the cutting edge. These are ones where if the trend continues in a lot of these various communities, you're absolutely going to be getting in on what's likely to be the ground floor of this kind of a transition or a switch over in what these communities are made up of in terms of how lucrative it is to invest or the demographics of the folks who are living there or how much high tech influences those local marketplaces. But let's also be clear that this article is not aimed really at investors. This is really aimed at the folks who are looking to do this. It's sort of being laid out there as options to consider when you're a high-tech person in these already high-tech areas. Where else might you want to go? Or if you're an entrepreneur, you're looking to start your company, other places to go. Now, things I've heard, just to sort of give a little bit more background, we've already talked about it in terms of the desire of folks to leave the area. And then for a lot of the folks I talk to, not just to leave the area, but the state as well, and migrate to other places. And the folks I talk to who are starting businesses are finding that it is so expensive in California to start a business and to pay the wages that got to be paid in order for folks to be able to get their housing. And even independent of that, there have been several companies where they have offered their employees the opportunity to move with the company and left their incomes the same. They did not reduce their yearly wages, despite the fact they were moving to a place that was far less expensive to live. That was a trend I've seen several times in the past. And it was like getting a raise because suddenly their housing costs were exceptionally lower and the cost of power was less. Electrical costs here in California are ridiculously high. Compare that with Texas. So you can see where, and then even if you've got that equal, right? You might say, well, why would a company do that? Because the company is still saving money by leaving California. So I think there are a lot of strategic pressures on both workers and employers that are going to reinforce this idea of, you know what, we don't need to be in Silicon Valley in order to be a successful high-tech company. All right, so what are they pushing here? One of the big ones, and this is one that's actually been on the list for a while, we'll get into a little bit of detail here. They don't really give you that much detail. They give you sort of a case study, so to speak, of a person who did it. In this first example, it's a gentleman named Jeff Hanlon who left Silicon Valley in 2015, and he found a town with a decent startup scene, stately houses, and home prices far below those of the Bay Area and other technology hubs. He traded I'm quoting the article now, traded a 550 square foot apartment in Mountain View, California. And I'm intimately familiar with Mountain View, California. That's actually where I started my real estate career way back in the late 80s. And he rented that for $2,400 a month. For a 4,000 square foot house in a historic neighborhood in Richmond, Virginia, which he purchased for $710,000 last year, which is not much by Silicon Valley standards. But when you contrast these two things, what he got in Richmond, Virginia for that $710,000 was far beyond anything he could have gotten for $710,000 here in Silicon Valley. And Richmond, Virginia is not alone. Some of the cities on this list that we're going to discuss are already seeing big influxes of tech dollars in terms of startups, new companies, and relocating companies that have just sort of decided that Silicon Valley is the hype of being there or the allure of being there just isn't as worth holding on to as it used to be. So, and that spells an opportunity for folks like you and me who are looking for the places where that kind of thing is going to happen, where that level of growth is going to occur. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at what the market is like in Richmond, Virginia right now. So to start off, we'll go ahead and check out what Trulia has to say about the market trends for Richmond, Virginia. The median sales price right now, outstanding, $214,500. Median rent is $1,100. And one other little tip, and this is something I'm going to cover. I promise we are actually going to do that series of videos of walking you through the process of evaluating areas to determine what you're going to look at. But for this one, I'm going to key off primarily the best high school in the area, which according to this and according to Great Schools is Open High School, which is right near downtown. So we can sort of focus on that area and take a look now and see what homes are for sale. What's the market look like right now? So for the purposes of this, I'm only looking in the school district that has this 8 or above rated high school in Richmond, and I'm only looking at 3 bedrooms or greater. And in terms of what's available, you've got a lot of different options here. There's just some beautiful looking row style houses. There's some not so great looking houses. But let's see here. We've got a $275,000 home that looks fantastic with 3 beds and 3 baths. We've got a 3 bedroom, 3 bath, $268,000 home that actually looks brand spanking new. We've got a 200,000 square foot home, $199,000. $350,000 for a home, what looks like in a historic region of Richmond here called Jackson Ward. Given what I'm seeing in terms of prices there, that would probably be an area I'd want to drive through to check out. On Church Hill, I'm seeing another place. Some of these look okay, some of these not so okay. I see one for $275,000, a 3 bed, 2 bath that looks like another historic building. But boy, I tell you, it's amazing what looks historic to a California boy who typically hasn't seen anything older than 20 years over the course of his career. But some great options here. These are looking like great potential opportunities. And then if we switch over and look just at Richmond houses for rent in the exact same area. Now, in these exact same areas, I'm seeing 1,600, 2,100, 1,000, 2,000, 1,095. If we just go with 3 beds or more, right near this same school, 1,088, 2,000, 1,700, 1,600, 2K, 2K, 1,600. I'll tell you what, just quick math in my head, given some of the prices we saw for homes, in some of the cases right on the same streets as this, you could almost, I don't know what the taxes are like in Virginia, but you could almost be positive cash flow right out of the chute on some of these without a huge amount of negotiating. So a lot of opportunities potentially in Richmond. It would be a good idea to get a little bit more insights into where the areas of high tech are to determine where and get some ground truth. That's always important. But from the basic numbers I'm seeing here, this actually represents some pretty good opportunities. So something to consider on our list. Now, that's sort of a side one. This was the very first case that they mentioned in this article. Let's now talk about cities they suggest considering when you're already in a high-tech area that's sort of already established, because those are the ones we're most interested in, right? We want to find the ones that are about to become more hot rather than ones that have already sort of gotten their stride. Now, we've already covered Richmond, but why Richmond? Instead of Washington, D.C., try Richmond, Virginia. That's kind of the point they're making with that suggestion. Let's move on to the next one. Instead of Austin, Texas, try Huntsville, Alabama. Now, the argument can be made that Austin, Texas has kind of reached its a peak, or maybe has already experienced a great deal of growth, and you want to try and take advantage of the idea that there's more growth coming, that you're getting in early, like on the ground floor, as I mentioned before. And so you can kind of make that argument that Austin is really already sort of rocketing up, and it has been for a very long time. Austin has sort of been a high-tech destination and growth location now for really since the late 80s, early 90s, as I mentioned. Dell is there. There's a variety of different companies there. So it's definitely one that's matured. So in considering Austin, I would also consider the outlying areas. And that's one reason why a couple of years ago we were talking extensively about Red Rock, which is just north of Austin. So I think there are still awesome opportunities around Austin. Some areas directly within Austin may be at a point where there's not a whole lot more headroom available, but there are areas surrounding it that I think are still pretty rock solid. But in this case, if you sort of want that, it's just starting out on its growth spurt for high tech, Huntsville is suggested. According to this article, a man named Donovan Duncan, president of media at Curse, achieved an entrepreneur's dream in August when the Huntsville, Alabama-based online gaming services company was bought by a unit of Amazon for an undisclosed amount. Let's see. But he decided to stay where he was, and he started his company here in Huntsville. The cost of living here is just incredible, according to Mr. Duncan. His house in Gurley, outside Huntsville, is a 2,600 square foot home on a 30-acre lot that he bought for $400,000 in 2014. Let's see. Huntsville's digital prowess emerged from the aerospace industries based there for decades. The city of roughly 194,000 is now planning to build a Google fiber network for fast network service, a must for programmers working from home. Senior Vice President of Economic Development at the local Chamber of Commerce pushes for this because he recognizes the importance of that to high-tech development. In the 9 months through September, the median sales prices in Huntsville was $167,000, according to Realtor.com. Now, and let's take a step aside here for a second, because while this is a great list and it's a great opportunity for us to shift our gaze towards cities we may not have talked about before, let's also pay attention to the fundamentals of what are getting these cities onto the list, because I think there are other places that potentially could benefit from this. What are the things that are drawing people in on these specific locations? So keep those in mind, because maybe some of these cities aren't on your hot list or places you're particularly interested in trying out or taking a closer look at. But maybe by identifying the fundamentals of what are making these more desirable locations, you can pick out places in the markets you are interested in that you might want to focus your investment efforts on. All right, we're going to go ahead and jump into the next cities on this list. But before we do, we're going to take a quick break, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right. Aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We're sort of running down what the Wall Street Journal is describing as tech jobs, cheaper housing, the new Silicon cities, the places that are sprouting up across the country that are going to be attractive enough to the high-tech folks that they'll not put down roots in Silicon Valley. They won't come here. They won't come to San Jose or Menlo Park or Cupertino or any of the places here, and they'll set down roots elsewhere. Now, we started off the show sort of covering some of the roots of why these decisions would be made. And I honestly believe that there's been a change in the psychology of it since the last time this kind of surged, which was in the early 90s. Because back then, most of the fundamental infrastructure that was required for this to happen was still really focused on Silicon Valley. A lot of other cities just couldn't claim the amazing infrastructure that was available here. That's changed, right? Since 1992, back in the days when AOL was sending everyone a CD in the mail to get them to connect to the internet via AOL. I can remember when my parents believed the internet was AOL. So that's how much things have changed since that first surge. And it's easy to see how it couldn't be sustained. Now, it's completely the opposite. You're not only are you able to get the same or better level of high-speed access to the internet in many of these other communities. Because believe it or not, Silicon Valley is not leading the way in terms of high-speed internet access. Some of these other communities, like we mentioned Chattanooga that we've talked about in a previous show, are all fiber. Fiber is iffy at best in many areas of Silicon Valley. In other words, there are tons of communities that simply don't have it. So these other places are actually offering more for some of these developers than what's being offered in Silicon Valley. All you're getting in Silicon Valley is proximity to other high-tech industries. And that's really what I think holds a lot of companies here, an ability to meet with and exchange ideas with other innovators that are in the Silicon Valley area. And also, when it comes right down to it, in Mountain View, there's a wonderful little stretch of road where just about every venture capitalist firm has an office. So if someone's trying to get venture capitalists to jump on board with money to push a business through, that is where they go. But even that has changed recently with crowdfunding options. Many companies are now finding that they can get access to cash and investment without having to jump through the hoops of going to venture capitalists. So I think that's another thing that fuels the desirability of not feeling like you have to be in Silicon Valley to make this work. Okay. Next on our list, and we've already talked about how Richmond, Virginia was one, and we actually got into a little bit more detail about that. Then we talked about Austin, Texas, kind of already being established, and now maybe start putting your gaze more towards a place like Huntsville, Alabama, where we talked about a few numbers there and what was making that more desirable. Next, instead of Boston, which has already got a pretty good reputation and already has a decent number of folks paying attention to it as a high-tech hub, how about Manchester, New Hampshire? Manchester, a city of 110,000 people that is an hour's drive from Boston, is replacing long-gone manufacturing jobs by reinventing itself as a tech center. With a quaint New England vibe and no sales or income tax. And believe me, if there's anything that will entice Californians to move to the East Coast, it is saying the words no sales or income tax. If you look, and that was another thing, I almost did a show based on the idea of focus on what it costs to live in various locations and try to anticipate migration based on that. And California has the highest taxes in terms of taking folks' money away from them. And for a lot of these companies, the big draw to keep their major contributors, the folks who are really major parts of their technology, their programmers and folks that may not want to leave California, telling them that they're going to get the same pay, but then they're going to move to a place where there is no income tax, that's huge, particularly for folks who live in California. Anyway, quaint New England vibe, no sales or income tax. The city added 2,000 technology jobs in the last 2 years, which increases the number of tech jobs to 7,200, according to Matt Cookson, who's the executive director for the nonprofit New Hampshire High Tech Council. Among Manchester's best-known companies is the internet performance management company DIN. Let's see. Manchester benefits from its proximity to Boston, according to Gray Chenoweth, a former DIN executive who is now chief operating officer at digital services firm Silvertech. Let's see. Now, here's something else that's interesting about these. Why these will also leverage off of their proximity to these other places. Now, within the context of commuting, Manchester can actually still leverage off of the Boston proximity, right? They're an hour away. Here in the Silicon Valley, an hour commute is not unusual at all. But in addition, because they've also got these high-tech developments in terms of infrastructure, it facilitates easier working from home. And for those folks in high tech who can work from home, anybody who can code can usually work from home. It really depends on the company and the mentality and how they manage it. But more and more, I'm coming across folks who are working from home, maybe not 5 days a week, but they work from home 3 days a week and then they go into the office 2 days a week. Or in some cases, I have one client who I just sold his home. He's not changing his job. He left Silicon Valley, moved to Los Angeles, where his parents live, and he is now continuing to work for the same company, and he just comes back up to Northern California, to Silicon Valley, 1 week out of every month and a half. So This is the kind of dynamic that we're seeing. And if we're aware of this and we can anticipate this and see where these various folks are going, as investors, this can be something that we can benefit from. Let's see. Downside of living in this particular location is harsh winters. In January 2016, the average temperature was 29 degrees, and this was one of the warmer years. In 2011, the city had 30 inches of snowfall. In the first 9 months of this year, the median house price in the Manchester-Nashua area was $241,000, a rise of 4% from the same period the previous year, according to Realtor.com. But again, when you're talking about the average price of a place like Silicon Valley being nudging up around $1 million, that $241,000 price tag is a heaven-sent number. Next, and this is a big one. This is one I have a little bit more insight into because I've actually seen the ground truth of it. Instead of San Francisco, try Eugene, Oregon. This is an amazing one. I've actually been to Eugene a couple of times. I was actually invited up there in the early 90s for an interview for a job that was a technology-based job. So Eugene's actually been around for a little while. According to, let's see, the article here, Todd Edmond, CEO of Wait Trainer, a restaurant software company, is what locals call a returning salmon, a native who left but returned to Eugene, a small city of 163,000, drawn to its growing tech sector, short commutes, and quality of life. The Eugene area has over 400 tech companies, ranging from startups to regional offices of companies like Symantec and Zynga. It has 4 daily flights to San Francisco and 1 to San Jose, but also a relaxed small-town feel and much lower cost than those cities. From 1998 to 2001, Mr. Edmond lived in Livingston, New Jersey, and commuted an hour and 45 minutes each way to his job in New York. In Eugene, his commute takes 12 minutes. The 2,200 square foot 4-bedroom house he bought for $300,000 in 2007 has a music studio and a backyard with a fire pit and a sandbox for the Edmonds' 4-year-old son, Stephen, and their 2-year-old daughter, Lyra. Mr. Edmonds' wife, Celeste, is CEO of software company Lunar Logic. This is what you're buying. This is what folks are looking for in high tech. It's about the lifestyle. It's about being able to continue to have their work scenario set, but have it in an environment that's a lot less stressful. And, that's so, for me and what I see and the folks I talk to, this is a hugely motivating factor on the part of buyers and renters, to be frank. So if you can tap in to that, if you can appeal to the folks who are looking for that, it suddenly becomes clear that by being aware of it, you're getting yourself into a potential marketplace of folks that others might not be aware of. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you figure this out, right? And it's easy to see how someone in Eugene would realize this. You're seeing the number of flights that go between these two cities, between San Francisco and San Jose and Eugene, is ridiculously high. It has 4 daily flights. The only way to explain that is folks are literally commuting by plane on some semi-regular basis. Suddenly, you as an entrepreneur might find that it makes sense to advertise your Eugene property in San Jose and San Francisco. It's going to depend on what you're seeing in terms of ground truth, but the desirability is clearly there. There's infrastructure already there to get people between those two locations, and there are tons of people there who are either already working for high-tech firms that are already there, which you can clearly cater to, but then I'll bet you there are tons of folks who are actually flying from Silicon Valley up there for that same kind of commuter lifestyle that I talked about a minute ago, where someone lives in a place like Eugene and flies in every month or every month and a half to have FaceTime with the folks that they're working with. The median sales price rose in the first 9 months of 2016 to $239,000. Median rents declined by nearly 2% in that period to $1,100 a month, according to Realtor.com. So these are places I think are absolutely worth looking at. I've always loved Eugene from a standpoint of a place to visit. And the idea of it being a potentially great investment just makes it that much more attractive. Now, of course, all of this is going to be based on what you find out as your ground truth. But I think these are some great starting points for you where you can just take that city, put it on your list of places to check out, and jump through the hoops that we've talked about before in terms of doing your due diligence without ever having to leave your office. Sit down, get in front of the computer, do some research on the cities, check out home values on Trulia, do some home searches on Trulio, on Zillow, and I think I said that backwards, Zillow and Trulia, and then Realtor.com for a more accurate representation of what homes are actually for sale. You're not going to get way off on Trulia or Zillow, but I do find that when a home sells, it does lag a little bit behind sometimes on Trulia and Zillow. So it's just something to be aware of, that you may find a home that shows as available on one and isn't available on the other because one's been updated before the other one was. So just keep that stuff in mind. And as I mentioned earlier in the show, this is absolutely a series of videos I'm going to be doing where the jumping off point from this sort of advice, here's some cities to check out, what do you do next? What do you do with that? And I'll just walk you through that in a video so that it becomes more clear for you. All right, folks, thank you very much for spending your valuable time with me. I hope I gave you some equally valuable things to think about. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to y'all next time.